Hey everyone, and welcome to the webinar today, Clinical Implementation of SWAY, Athletic Trainer in a Collegiate Setting. Our awesome guest today is Mr. Dave Polanski from the University of Arkansas. I'll talk to you a little bit about the course agenda in a second here. This is a webinar series that we've put together. As you can see, this one here is Athletic Trainer in a Collegiate Setting, but we do have others of these. If you're interested, just let us know, and we can absolutely send you the links to these. They're also on our website, but they're custom to what setting you're in and what your profession is, so that you can get direct information from someone who's practicing the exact same way that you're going to be practicing in your clinic. In these series, we do go through case presentations. We go through tips for clinical implementation, clinical and sideline evaluation, suggestions for interpretation. We're going to do a clinical report breakdown, and then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. A little bit of a difference here is Dave is going to go through the normative data. So he'll do a deep dive there, but also we're going to get a look at SWAY's 5.0 clinical report. All right, my name is Labiba Russo, and I have a continuing education and concussion background. Thrilled to be here. Started my career about 20 years ago at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, recruited over to Impact to be the first employee, left Impact, and now I'm here with SWAY. Love this company, love where we're heading, and thankful that you all are here with us. Our presenter, one of our presenters today is Chase Curtis, and Chase will be working alongside Dave, really filling in the gaps with the normative data and some of the new clinical report. This report is not available yet, so a lot of you will be seeing it for the first time, and Chase can let you know when the new clinical report will be available this spring. So Chase is our CEO and founder, neuroscience background, has been in the field for a number of years, a huge pioneer. Love working with him, and just a trailblazer and huge advocate for athletic trainers. Again, great guy, and really has done a lot for the field, and I'm honored and thrilled to be working with him. And our presenter today is Dave Polanski, University of Arkansas. Dave's education, he started at Purdue University and got his master's in athletic training from the University of Arizona. His clinical experience includes assistant athletic trainer for College of William and Mary in UCLA, director of sports medicine, University of Tulsa, where he actually was the athletic trainer for 2 SWAY members. So 2 members of our team were actually worked with him when he was at University of Tulsa, and then right now he's associate director of sports medicine and head football athletic trainer for the University of Arkansas. Dave, so great to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Chase, where he's going to go ahead and give us a little overview of SWAY. We'll do that for just a few minutes, and then we'll have Dave go ahead and start with his presentation.
Sounds good. Well, I will keep this to a fairly quick overview. Let me go full screen here. So I think the intent really is just to give kind of an overview of the SWAY test. I'll touch really briefly on some of the updates that we're making to the clinical report. Like Labiba said, obviously those are kind of finalizing those as a part of our next software release, SWAY 5.0, and really excited to kind of push forward on that. We are really targeting kind of the end of May right now for a release date on SWAY 5.0, and excited about kind of the progress we have towards that to really be vetted and tested and ready to roll full steam for fall sports this year. So really quickly, just as a highlight or kind of an overview, SWAY, we make balance and cognitive assessments objective and accessible on any mobile device or tablet. So we've spent a lot of time showing consistency across both iOS and Android devices, so that your athletes can use any device that they have, or you can use any device that you have to get accurate objective measures. Quick bullet points on what makes us unique. Baseline testing is really fast. This next release also has a ton of updates to the overall baseline testing process. We put everything in one system, so balance, cognitive testing, symptom tracking, and obviously the ability to test anywhere has been huge over the last year with COVID and kind of the inability to access athletes at all times. Well-validated and proven platform, over 60 published research articles, and obviously we go through all of the kind of medical device standards of providing the most verified and valid software available. So a quick overview of our tests, and I know Dave's going to dive into most of these tests today in his case studies. Balance testing, really simple. You take the mobile device that you have as you begin test, hold it against your chest, and go through your standard balance testing protocol. So with most athletic programs, they're using a modified BEST protocol, although we have lots of other protocols built in the system, modified CATSIB, CDC 4-stage, and others. Our cognitive tests are really a collection of high-level psychomotor variables like simple reaction time, inspection time, which is a measure of visual processing speed, impulse control, which is a go, no-go, basic measure of some kind of executive functioning components and attention, and then we've got a delayed recall and working memory test. I'll kind of fly through some of those, but as a part of our testing platform, we mark all baseline tests in blue and event tests, as Dave is going to be going through, in orange, but you can easily select the type of test you want to run at each given protocol. So this is a Sports Plus protocol, and I've deselected the memory tests. Again, I can do any kind of customization I want to what tests I'm going to run in which scenario. Quickly on our balance test, as I said, that's holding the device against the chest and going through your standard protocol. Like I said, with the athletic population, it's usually a modified BEST protocol. We've done a ton of validation on this platform against Force platform technology and showing consistency from the standpoint of comparisons to Biodex or other platforms that are kind of used in a clinical setting typically. Again, kind of from a quick standpoint of reaction time, we are using the motion sensors that are built into the device to get a really accurate measure of reaction time. So the way this test works is when the screen changes color to orange, you're just moving the device really quickly. And again, we're using the accelerometer that's built into the device to get a really highly accurate measure of reaction time. We can get down to about 10 milliseconds of latency compared to that high-speed camera as a gold standard. Whereas if you're using touch input or mouse and keyboard input from a cognitive testing perspective, you have variable latency of up to 100 milliseconds, which can be a really big deal when you're trying to measure somebody's simple reaction time of 160, 200, 250 milliseconds. That's a large amount of error kind of overall into that. So our impulse control test, again, very similar, using the same technology from a motion sensor perspective, but this is a go or no-go test. So move the device when there's a green check, don't move it when it's a red X. And then quickly, our last two tests. This is impulse or inspection time. The way this test works is you have two T's displayed on the screen like you see here in gray, and then they are quickly masked with a blue rectangle, and you've got to tap the side of the screen which displayed the longer line. So when that is really quickly displayed, you've got to be able to detect which of those is longer. So really we're looking at that kind of very early visual processing speed part of a reaction time test to really isolate that component and see at what kind of display rate can you visually process the difference between those two T's being displayed on the screen. I'll show you what that looks like really quickly in kind of 1,000 frames per second. You can see cool how the device is actually printing on the screen. One screen refresh later, coming back around and printing those T's on there. So you can see that kind of overview laid out and what that looks like from a testing perspective. The memory test, again, this is a delayed recall and working memory test. So you can see the 3 digits that are displayed on the screen that you're going to hold kind of in your working memory. And then you're going to get a really simple test that's looking at a tracking of the squares. So you'll see one square highlighted, and then you've got to track that sequence and see how many in a row you can actually recall. So again, that's a working memory test. The first 3 letters that it's going to ask you for in the end is a delayed recall. Now, real quick, and then we'll let Dave dive into it. This is a quick sample of our new clinical report. And so what you're seeing here from a scale perspective, the gray bars are normative comparison for that sex and age. And so, if this is a 20-year-old male, you'd be able to see kind of what, based on our norms, and on the balance side, I think we have close to 100,000. You can see what's in the 25th to 75th percentile here in the light gray. So that is low average and high average. In the dark gray, you're seeing the 10th to 90th percentile. That's low and high. And then on the outside of the dark gray spectrum, you have very low below 10th percentile and very high above 90th percentile. The colored band here is baseline score, and then the actual color indicates consistency. So green, really consistent baseline. Yellow is moderate consistency from a variability perspective. And then the red dot is, hey, there was a decent amount, high variability in the score. But overall, gives you a really clear kind of indication of what those scores are. And then I think Dave's going to dive in on some of the normative data, so I will leave those for his presentation.
Sounds good. Can you see my screen?
I believe so.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Hey, appreciate you guys being here. Wanted to give a quick shout out to Corey Romings. I saw he was listed as an attendee. Corey was an athlete of mine back in Tulsa. Hope things are going well, Corey. And Dylan, I talked to Dylan last week, so hope you guys are doing well with this company. As you can tell, this is my background. They introduced me earlier, so just real quick, this is where I've been. Been in college athletics for 20 plus years. Obviously enjoy this setting, and working with this level of athlete has been a lot of fun since I've been here. Wanted to quickly discuss here today why, what my point of this conversation is to show how we're using Sway, why we decided to use Sway. There's a lot of things, and Chase just reviewed a lot of it, of what went into our decision. But obviously the NCAA came out with the guidelines of what we need to do in a concussion policy. And I think Sway met all of those, and it was with the ease of how to use it. We've become, I used it over at Tulsa, and I brought it over here to Arkansas. So we'll go through some of those things of what it's able to do. Looking at the NCAA concussion policy, we're required to get a history, right? We're required to do a symptom evaluation, cognitive assessment, and balance. You look at all that, Sway is able to do those things. The only thing left is that concussion history that we get with their pre-participation physical. Also, the new baselines that they say are recommended if somebody has a concussion or if somebody has a long, complicated recovery. I think the baseline aspect of Sway is the fact that it can be done so quickly is really something that is helpful. So what we've implemented here is we do a baseline Sway on every athlete every year, and it really hasn't been a time-intensive process for us. Obviously, making sure, this is just a reminder of, the NCAA is telling us if we suspect a concussion, we must remove them from practice and be evaluated. And if they suspected, we've got to take them out of play for that day. One of the things I like about Sway is we can do this Sway test, and we can, our providers, our doctors don't have to be on site, and they can, I can call them and say, hey, Johnny just had a concussion. Take a look at it, and they can look at their Sway results. And so when they come to the clinic that night or the next day, they can already have seen their results and see what I've seen on the sideline or what I've seen at the side of after practice. So it gives us a communication between our physicians. And obviously right now, with every sport except for football being in season, this spring. The doctors are stretched pretty thin as the athletic training staff is stretched thin. So it helps communication across from site to site. It's been a benefit to this program. It's easy access for our physicians because they get it on their phone as well. So, there's tons of tools out there. We look, there's Impact, there's CogSport, there's just doing the best test. There's all kinds of things that you can do. You've got to narrow your choices down somehow. And so what I was looking for was for a tool that met all the requirements, or most of the requirements, as many as they could in one shop. And so for me, I've always used Impact for about 20 years. I've used Impact. When Sway came around, I started using that as well. I've used King Divic, I've used the bombs, I've used CP Screen, all of those things. So what I've tried to do is narrow it down to what value I'm getting from a test. Currently, we use Sway and Impact. I could see a day where Impact may not be a tool that we utilize. I know some people across the country are slowly phasing that out possibly. It's still a great test, I think, for long concentration and those types of things. So right now I'm still using it, but Sway has become our tool that we use on the sideline initially, use it for tracking every day, every other day, and also a good kind of making sure that they're back to within baseline. So we use that throughout the process. We do bombs and CP Screen, which is another kind of symptomatic symptom checklist type thing, to kind of look at what kind of symptoms, where they fit, what concussion types that we're dealing with. So narrowing it down to tests that give us value. Just to review, this is, baseline, what we need to do, incident, what we need to do. One of the things, is making sure that you or your physicians are still doing a good basic physical neurologic exam. No app, no test, nothing else besides you and the physicians are going to be able to do some of these things. So clinical judgment is still a huge part of this evaluation. So why we went with Sway, I think number one, it's less cumbersome than the other tools. Also, it's short test times. So on the sideline, baseline, it's able to get things in minutes. You're done and get a good evaluation. Everybody has a phone with them. So in baseline, you can assign a baseline test and open it up, and the student athletes can download the app onto their phone, take the test, then delete the app, and you have the data. So it makes it easy to do baselines with big groups. And like I said before, we can review those results amongst our medical staff. So I can review results from the football team, or I can look at if a track athlete gets a concussion and they're on the road, I can review those results and help our track athletic trainer kind of make sense of them. Our doctors can do the same. So that's what we looked at with Sway as, why are we going to do it? Well, it's able to track the symptoms, it's able to test balance, it's able to do reaction time, the cognitive functions over time. All of those things make it a valuable tool and give me actionable data every time I have a kid take the test. So when do we do it? Obviously, I told you we do it in baseline. What we've done is try to individualize it or do small groups. The more people you get in a group, the less serious they take it. So we've tried to really narrow it down to 3 or so people at a time in one area taking the test with somebody supervising them, so they can try to take it more seriously. We try to compare their data when we're finished to the norms, and also kind of see if they're consistent. That way, if they're not, we can make them redo the test. A lot of times there's a learning curve, or I don't know about a learning curve, more of a, do they really take it seriously the first test they go through? Chase mentioned the updates are going to be really good and make it more efficient to get through the testing. And it's gonna, he said they're gonna be able to, if you do 2 tests and they're consistent, then you're gonna be done. You don't have to do a third. But if they're inconsistent, it'll have you do more. So it's kind of a nice, that's gonna be a nice, smoother system when we start doing our baselines this summer for our incoming athletes. We also use it post-injury, obviously in the tent or in the locker room, and we use it throughout the return process. You know, I don't do it every day just because I think I try to get different information every day, but I do use it quite a bit through the process to try to track what their symptoms are, try to see how they're feeling, making sure that we use this data and the kids can see how they're doing in their balance, see how they're doing in reaction time. They can see the results instantly. This is going to be the new kind of reporting system, and it looks really nice. You know, it's definitely nice to see where your kids stand in terms of the norms and how consistent their baseline is. So that red line on the balance is showing that this person's baseline data was pretty inconsistent. And the green lines here are showing that the consistency is really good. The yellow is an intermediate, moderate consistency. So you can look at this and see where somebody is at when you get their baselines finished. This next one is showing where they stand after. This is an actual test, so it'll give you the number. You know, so his balance is 57 compared to his norms. It's you know, in the very low range. Reaction time is down 23%. And his reaction is in the very low range, but his baseline is kind of in the low side anyway, but he's still seeing that low reaction time. So when you look at a test and this is the report you see, it's pretty easy to see where somebody is. You get this test right away from, after you close out, after they're finished, it pops up and you can kind of see where they are compared to their baseline. And we'll go through later if somebody has an inconsistent baseline, how you can kind of narrow it down and make it a more consistent result by isolating some of the data. One of the things I was always worried about is the norms. What are norms? And when I'm looking at tests, what am I looking for? What's if I don't have a baseline on somebody, or if somebody their baseline is inconsistent, what is the norm? What do I expect to see in a baseline? So with the balance test, here's the normative data. If you look at my age group that I deal with, ages 18 to 21, you can kind of see for the males, their scores, their median sway score for balance is, just over 80. The women, it's a little higher. So that gives you an idea. And there's, about 100,000, data points that they've been able to use to get these norms. So that may feel comfortable with where they're at. Here's a simple reaction time. I think the simple reaction time is one of the best tests. It really shows right away on the sideline a lot of times that there's a problem. And here's, again, the age group that we're dealing with. You're looking around, between 220 and 270 milliseconds of being normal is what you're going to see with the guys. You're going to, that's their test range. And so if somebody does a baseline test and they're really low, you may want to look at that again and have them redo it. Typically, you're going to see a score between 200 and 300 with a sway score between 60 and 80. That's just the data points that they've done with their normative data. Impulse control, they have a little bit less in terms of volume of data points to get their norms, but I think it's been pretty good, 30, 40,000 of these data points to show where these impulse control numbers are. One of the things you always need to make sure of is that the impulse control should be slower, or the sway score should be lower, because this test is whether it's a reaction time test with a cognitive function in it. So they've got to think about something before they react. So it should be slower than their simple reaction time. So if you see a baseline and their impulse control is the same as the reaction time, they probably didn't do the reaction time as good or weren't focused on that as well. So that's something to look for when you're looking at somebody's results after they get tested, or after they get a concussion and you're testing them. Inspection time. Again, here's the normative data on that. Gives you the test results because of the speed that the screen changes, 17 milliseconds at a time. So you're at 17 milliseconds, 34, 51, 68. Those are the scores you're going to get. And the mean time is 51 to 68. So I've had a few guys get 17 on their baseline. That's as fast as the phone will let it go. So you know our athletes are pretty good with their visual processing, and so you're going to see. But anytime you see a 34 millisecond increase, that's kind of a reason for a concern, and so that's what you're looking for when you're looking at that inspection time in the post test. The memory function, the sway scores are right around 70. So that's what you want to see to make sure that they match into that normative range. And again, I think the new scale that you're going to see where what the norms are, that gray scale that we looked at earlier is going to show you on each person where they fall, is going to be helpful to know. Does it match up to their, what their academic situation is? Are they coming in? Are they a really bright student and they're in the lower percentiles? Well, maybe they just didn't do very well on the test. They didn't take it seriously, or it matches up. The kid struggles. He's got a learning disability. He's got ADHD. He's got a focus problem. So it's nice to be able to see that gray bar where they match up into these normative numbers. So I wanted to kind of review some case studies just to talk about how we utilize it and what it showed, how it helped us manage some of these cases. The first case happened during a game. It was our quarterback. He had no history of prior concussion. He has a history of motion sickness. Wears glasses. He hit the back of his head to the ground when he got sacked. Obviously weren't very good in 2019 or 2020, as a matter of fact, but quarterback was on the ground a lot. So I think the best thing this case showed, we came off the field, he got hurt on the 23rd. He came into the tent and we went ahead and evaluated him. He was obviously concussed. His memory wasn't that great. The doctor looked at him. I wasn't in the tent with him, and the doctor just didn't want to do any testing. He just felt he was done for the day. We removed him right away. He didn't have any more hits to the head or hits to the body. The next day we did his first sway, and these are the results we saw. So he was minus 37% on the balance. His reaction time was down. Everything was low. We didn't do memory in 2019 because the memory function came out that fall, and so we have implemented it since. But some of these case studies are all going to be from the fall of 19. So anyway, you see that their baselines and how they respond or how they fall within the gray bar of the normative data and where his numbers are. So you can see he's well below, and to see the percentages that he's off from his baseline. Then 4 days post-injury, this is the information we had. He's back. He's within 10% or better than his baseline and all of everything. He has no symptoms. This case is what I like. These are the simple recoveries. This was excellent. He had a concussion. We kept him out right away. He didn't play anymore. He had no, extended time loss. If everything was like this, it'd be really easy for us to deal with. But he was back. Could have played the next week. Actually, he didn't. We held him out. But he was ready to go just because it was last game of the season, coaches made a coaching decision to go ahead and to not play him. Here's the graph you'll see on the app as you're looking at it. So all those blue dots are his 3 baselines. You can see that first post-injury, how the balance really dropped, and then it went back up to within normal. So this graph here that you'll see on the app as well is another good visual, I think, of where everybody is at their testing and when they get back to normal. It's another good visual for the player to see that they're pretty off, and sometimes the coaches want to see it. My experience is sometimes the coaches with a good visual will kind of understand a little bit better. Here's the data points of all of his numbers. I like to look at this sometimes as I'm looking at somebody, to look at all of the different data points for the balance, to see if, make sure he's trying and working hard. You see this one here, the tandem on his post-injury is a 7. So you can really see where he was having problems. The rest of them look pretty good. Both his tandems were pretty low, 55 and 7. Single leg on his left leg was pretty bad. So you kind of see where he was having issues. So rehab wise, we can use that and identify, hey, if we want to help this kid and challenge him balance wise, that may help him in recovery. It may also just help him in general injury prevention. See if his balance can get back up to normal, which it did 4 days later. So we really didn't have to worry about that. Here's the final look at this kid. Post-injury 1 and post-injury 2 for the sway. He was, you can see all the numbers dip. His symptoms were 23, symptom score. And then comparing this to impact, we did an impact on him on 2 days post-injury on the 25th of November. So the day after that first sway was done. And you look at that, and his impact was normal with everything except for his symptoms. So for us, I like to use that impact, that first day, second day post-injury, to kind of see where he is. And I like to compare it to the sway to see what the sway picked up that the impact didn't, or vice versa. And for this one, we did it, and then we didn't do his impact again because all of his the memory and stuff was within normal. The only thing we had to check on were the symptoms. So the next day, 2 days later, we just did the sway again when he said he was symptom free. It was back to normal, and we went ahead and went through the return protocol. So that's how we combine and use both of those things together right now. Case 2. Case 2, this is an offensive lineman that came off the field and had some just some symptoms. It was during practice, and we went ahead and he practiced a little bit more. It was one of those things where the kid didn't want to admit he had a concussion. He came off, and so we were trying to talk to him about it, and he went ahead and did the sway. Obviously, he had a lot of symptoms. And we also went ahead and obviously his test scores were really bad. Look at that reaction time, it was down 120%. And he had a good solid baseline where it's very consistent. May not be the fastest reaction time, but it's very consistent. And so we obviously pulled him from practice, and then we look at 1 week post-op, or 1 week post-op, 1 week post-injury, he's back up, and he's back above baseline, just above baseline, 3%, 2%. Everything looks really good. And he had a pretty uncomplicated recovery. It was nice to see that. It was 1 week. But again, looking at this, as you dive into the numbers, you look at his initial baseline balance. His feet together was 73. His tandem was 0. So I'm looking at that, and you look at this red bar over here as to why that explains why he has such a wide variety in his baseline. And so what you're able to do is you're able to go in and you can identify those red numbers as being kind of outliers, and you can go in now and edit the baseline, take those numbers out, and that's what gives us this nice tight baseline that you saw in the previous slide. So as you go through, you don't necessarily, you can, if you see it at baseline, that's great. You can add another baseline if you want, or if you see it post and you're looking at a kid post injury, you can edit out that baseline, that abnormal, that abnormal test data. Because look, a 0, obviously on baseline, it was the first one he did. I'm guessing that tandem stance that he did, he probably didn't do it at all. He just let the timer run out. Or he thought he was supposed to do something else and it registered as a 0. So that first baseline really wasn't good, but if you look at baseline 2 and 3, they're really consistent and you're able to pull that out. So it's really nice to be able to do in this format on Sway, is to be able to go ahead and edit those things out. Chase told me that in updates are to come, they're going to automatically flag those for you. So that'll be something that'll be good to see as well. So, and this is just a view on it right now. So this is how I noticed it. Looked on the computer after we did his initial test, and it lists all of the baselines down at the bottom. That pink line shows you, hey, there's something wrong with this one. And obviously you see the 0 score. So we were able to look at it and realize we could take that one out and get a better sense for how this kid was doing. This just shows through how, yeah, he tested normal, but you know, when every day that we tested him, what his symptoms were. You can get this report, you can share it with your doctors, the doctors can look at it, we can kind of see where he is and see a progression of what's going on in a kid's recovery from the first day of October 7th, or no, October 9th is when he first took his test, and October 17th he was back to normal but just had a symptom score of 2. So kind of nice to be able to track this. You know, like I said, I don't use this every day. You don't see a test every day, because on those other days we either did impact early on or we did maybe some bombs or something else to kind of look at what his symptoms were. Again, I think if you ask a kid of symptoms every day, you're gonna, you know, you get kids focused on the symptoms, and that's not what you want. So here's the review of this kid. You can see his first day that we did it was October 9th on the Sway. October 10th, we did his impact. It was very bad. On October 17th, we re-impacted him. He had no symptoms and his Sway was normal. And so we were able to progress him back to activity. You know, we during this process, he's doing some, you know, we bike first and then do some light jogging and those types of things, even while they're symptomatic. As long as their symptoms don't get worse, our doctors want us to do some activity with them. So when he got to October 17th, he had done some running and that kind of stuff, and so we were able to progress him back into some non-contact and contact work. Case 3, we were able to, another offensive lineman, we were able to look at him. He came off the field. He was really, really dizzy, you know, and it was during practice. And you look at his balance and you see this report, and it shows that he's got 0s in tandem and a single leg for the right. We were doing this test on him and he almost fell over. So even the feet together, he was really, really bad. So those 0s, he kind of did the test, but I was holding him. I was basically having to hold him up. So we just let the clock run through and didn't really do, obviously we didn't do the test. He had 0s on him. He was so dizzy, he was almost falling over. And so we noted that in the app. You can type in notes And so when I look at this test result in the notes section, it says didn't do it because he was too dizzy. And so that's another good way to record things at the time of injury. And then looking at his reaction time and impulse, everything was low. Inspection time was really bad, obviously 94%. His inspection time baseline was really good, but looking at it post-injury, he just couldn't, figure out what was going on. He was initially pretty bad off, real dizzy, everything. It took this gentleman 2 weeks to kind of get back, but 2 weeks, you look at this and he had everything back up in the very high in terms of normative data, above his norms or back within his normal range with everything. It's kind of with no symptoms. So it was, again, something that we were able to track through this process, and you could see how he improved with everything. His graph, again, you look at that first yellow dot for balance, it's way down the 20 score of 20. Well, that's because he had all those zeros in those things. You can see this, on day one, we could see how bad everything else dropped off. And it's nice to be able to look at this tendency graph. Again, looking at all of this, seeing how the breadth of symptoms he had, where he was, we were able to look at what symptoms were more prevalent. Dizziness as a sign of on-field dizziness, initial injury I've noticed it tends to correlates with some of the data out there that correlates to longer recovery times. In this case, it was right on. He was so dizzy afterwards, and it just took him a couple weeks to get back to normal. You look at, we tested him right at 10-1, 10-2, then we waited 4 or 5 days to do it again. He was still pretty symptomatic. And then we kind of every other day, every day. Sometimes I'll test them because they'll come in and they'll want to do it, and I'll let them do it again. Just kind of each case is very different with how often we go through this testing process. 10-10, he tested again. That was a Thursday, so he was wanting to be able to travel. If he was normal, we could have taken him, not played, but taken him. So we let him test. He wasn't back to normal. 10-14 was a Monday. That was our off day. We tested him again on 10-14. He was back to normal. So through the weekend, we were able to have him do some running and things, and so we could get him back to practice that next week. So here's kind of review of this gentleman. 10-3, we impacted him day 2. 10-10, we did an impact. It was basically normal except for one symptom. So we didn't re-impacted him. We re-impacted him in February as a new. We typically re-impact everybody after they get a concussion in the fall, just before we get to spring practice, so we have a fresh baseline on them. So this kind of looking at this first day post-injury, everything was down. Correlates to the next day he did his impact. There was, his memory composite was down and his symptom score was 56. So the two tests seem to correlate pretty good of what they find somebody's abnormal. This last test I threw in is just something interesting. We had a guy come in on 11/20, practiced the day before. He said he doesn't remember getting hit. He came in the morning. He was late for workouts. He slept through his workout. He has a history of concussion and ADD. He came in and he goes, I don't know what's wrong. I feel like I have a concussion. He goes, but I don't remember being hit. We did the impact, we did the sway test. We didn't do an impact because the sway, you're looking at, he's in a very low percentile rank with balance. His reaction time is down. His impulse control or his inspection time is normal, but his symptom score was really, really high, obviously. And so we're like, what's going on with this kid? We weren't practicing that day. So he had the day off anyway. And so we're like, well, just relax and we'll see. We'll have you see the doctor. We'll kind of see what's going on. The next day he comes in and he has a fever of 102 and swollen cheeks. It goes back to show that, you know, not all symptoms are concussion, because if you look at this kid the next day, like I said, he had a fever, swollen cheeks. In that month of November of 2019, we had a mumps outbreak here amongst our football team and on campus in the general population. It turns out this kid had the mumps, so he wasn't concussed. But another reason I wanted to show this is you look at this tendency graph and you look at this and it's kind of all over the place. The second data point, his balance is really high. The fifth data point, his balance is really low on his baselines. That's why he had so many baselines. We were trying to normalize this kid. So, and then the yellow dots over there are the test day that he did when he came in. And you're looking at, I looked at those and I said, he looks pretty normal, except for those two highs and lows. I wish I could take those out. And obviously, like I said before, you can. So you can take those test dates out. And this kind of shows you those in the number format there. And so I took those test data out and look at that tendency graph on the bottom. Everything looks within normal now. So obviously, you know, when I looked at this, I was like, I don't think it's a concussion. I don't know why he has all these symptoms. I trusted the kid because he had a previous concussion with us. And he said, I feel just like I did before. So we just monitored him. Thankfully, it was a day off, except for lifting. And turns out he was sick and he didn't have a concussion. But it was just, this is a good data point, I thought, to show if you get rid of the highs and lows that are abnormal, you can kind of get a better tendency line here and kind of look at it and compare. So I like being able to do that with this product. It makes it really nice. Lessons we've learned since I've been using this is I think I like being able to do the baseline testing. You give the kids a code, they go on their phone, they do it. You just got to make sure you're in small groups and they're supervised. I like being able to review the baseline tests after they're done. You can look at them, compare them to norms. That way, if somebody needs to go ahead and redo another baseline, add another test to it so you can get a better consistency, I think that's good. But if you don't, and you're not able to do it because you've got hundreds of kids you're looking at, then when you do an incident test, you can pull out those highs and lows that, like I showed in the last example or the previous one, to really create a good baseline for that person. I think multiple tools helps. You don't want to necessarily rely just on one, but this tool answers a lot of the questions you have on balance, memory, cognitive functions, reaction time. So it really helps a lot and is able to provide a good breadth of information for you. And also, you know, also they've added, or they have on there, you can do the Maddox questions and record those in there on a sideline eval. So those are good questions to use. So I think that's something that I haven't recorded them on this before, but I think next year I'm going to start. I typically ask those types of questions, as most people do. So I think I'll start recording them so I have a record that I've asked them those questions at the time of injury. Hope that was helpful. Obviously, this is my email address. Anybody can contact me anytime, or hopefully there's some questions. Laviva, I'm done.
All right, awesome, Dave. Thank you so much. Lots of great information. Before I switch over to my screen, someone's asking if you can go over the range numbers again and explain what they mean clinically versus baseline average. And Chase is here with us. Maybe Chase wants to jump in as well. But the question is, can you go over the range numbers again and explain what they mean clinically versus baseline average?
Okay. So I'll look at, I think we can show it from here. The gray bar is the range, the normative range. The red bar is my athlete's baseline. So on the left side, you have the dark gray bar here. That's 10 to 25 percentile. This is 25th to 75th percentile, and there's above that. So what it means clinically to me is where is this person in regards to the norms, and how is I like to look at it as I'll match it up with what kind of student are they, what kind of do they have ADHD, do they have other attention problems that may give them a slower reaction time or impulse control, those types of things, and that's just gives me idea of where they are. Ideally, I'd like to see a yellow or green all the time. If there's a red, I will go ahead and try to add a baseline to them. But clinically, obviously we use their baseline more than norms. If you don't have a baseline, then that's when I think you use this normative line. If you only had their test data and no norms, you'd want to see where they fall on the normative line and see if that matched up to what you thought their capabilities were, and give you an idea of where they stood. Does that make sense, Chase?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the only thing that I would add is just, clinically, if you're using it without baseline data, those norms, as you're saying, Dave, provide a great reference point for what does this score mean overall compared to kind of a normal healthy population. And then typically you're looking at trends in multiple tests. So, are they going from the 5th percentile to the 20th to the 30th to the 40th, and then they plateau? And so you're using those norms obviously as a benchmark for improvement on kind of seeing how they, what their trajectory looks like. Obviously, much better to have a baseline and to have a really consistent baseline, for that score, like you're seeing in impulse control and inspection time on this specific case study. But no, I think that was a great interpretation. And generally, we've got reliable change measures for each of these different test types that say, hey, here's a kind of clinically meaningful difference at specific test. But general rule of thumb is somewhere between 10 to 15% off of their baseline is usually a pretty good kind of metric for, hey, there's more concern to dive deeper in here, or hey, they're generally within kind of where normal is for them. And like you're seeing in this case too, a lot of times in, by the time they've gone through multiple different post-injury tests, they are outperforming their baseline, right? There's a little bit of learning curve to that. There's a motivational piece from an attention perspective where, hey, I really want to score well on this and pass this test because, at the end of that tunnel is a positive thing for me. So there is a little bit of that too when you're accounting into baseline they took versus them trying to really perform well and not being able to, just shows a broader gap from the ability to perform back to baseline normal.
Yeah, I think the motivation piece is huge. They start figuring out and start trying on every rep. I think that really is something that why you end up with these scores above baseline.
Yeah, and very typical, right? Very typical to see that compared to what their baseline average is.
Anything else, Labiba?
Yeah, we have a couple more questions. Let me go ahead and show my screen, and let's get started with the next set of questions here. All right, how often are you repeating sway testing post-injury? Are you doing it daily? And do you have them track their symptoms regularly?
Well, I like I said, every case is different. Sometimes I'll try to do a test initially at time of injury. We probably do 95% of the time. Sometimes the docs see them first and they're like, hey, I don't want to do any testing. So, okay, that's fine. So we'll wait till the next day. But I typically try to do it on the day of injury, so we have a sense of where they were at their worst. And then, I usually try to do an impact day 1 or 2 post-injury. So if I do an impact, I won't do a sway that day because I've collected their symptoms on the impact and I've stressed them enough on that day. But after that, so I'll do, kind of depends on how they're feeling. If I, we'll do it probably, if a typical 7 to 10 or 10 to 14 day recovery, I'll do a sway every other day, just to kind of get that trajectory like Chase was mentioning, see them, make sure they're showing progress. Because they can tell you they're feeling better, but I like to see it. I won't track their symptoms outside of this. When I look at them, I don't tell them, I try not to get them to focus on their symptoms, because I want to get them thinking about other things, going to class as soon as they can, getting out and about, being a normal kid as much as they can, to try to get the focus off their symptoms. But so each one is different, but I would say on average, we probably do sway every other day through the process.
All right, let's move on to our next question. How soon do you sway test on the sideline, and what is your sideline protocol?
Well, so coming off the field or if they come to, kind of depends if they come to me or, if I see it in practice or in game and walk them off the field, I'd like to give them 3 to 5 minutes to kind of settle down. In that 3 to 5 minutes, that's when I'm going to do my clinical exam of, strength, neurologic testing, just kind of quickly assess them to make sure, see where they're at, give them a chance to kind of explain to me what they remember from the accident, get that data from them, ask them the Maddox questions if I can't, get some answers to that, are they oriented to time and place, those types of things. And then I'll run them through the sway. Once I do the sway test, look at the results from that. And by that point, I've got a good idea of, should we hold them or should we not hold them? Typically going into the sway, you probably already have a good idea just because in that 5 minutes that you're talking to them, they've told you their symptoms. They've told you how they're feeling. You've found out that they can't remember or they can remember what's going on. Did they black out? Did they not black out? Are they dizzy? Are they not? So the sway results kind of usually confirm what I'm already assuming or already assessing with them. But occasionally it'll be one of those questionable things where the kids in a game, especially, the kids are adamant that they feel fine, they don't have a problem. And we had a case like that this year. A kid came off, felt fine, said he felt fine, but he got hammered and actually, you saw him drop the ball when he got hit. He knocked out. I got to him on the field. He woke up, and he came off the sideline and saying he felt great, no problems, no symptoms, no nothing. We were talking to him, did a sway, reported no symptoms, but his reaction time was bad. His balance was bad. And then he started crying. So, it's one of those things where, we try to do it because it gives us good information and it helps confirm what we feel is going on. Sideline protocol, that is our sideline protocol. Get them off the field, do the evaluation, which includes the sway, consult with the doctors, and then monitor them for the rest of the game or monitor them for the rest of practice and see how they're doing, and progress them, or monitor them until we can release them, until we feel comfortable releasing them home with we usually release them home with their roommates.
All right, let's go on to, thank you, Dave. That was great. Are you able to save the clinical results as a PDF? And can you send them to other healthcare professionals and or save them in our EMR system?
Yeah, you can log in and save them. Log in. Some of those screens I showed you, that's exactly what they were. The screens that had the symptoms each day and the test results. Those are PDFs that you can log in on the computer to your account and save it as a PDF. Email it to your doctor. Email it to your psychologist, whoever you want. And then you can save it and put it into your EMR if you'd like. But again, one of the benefits of this is if your doctor's on the system, he can just look at it as well on his phone to get a quick glimpse of what's going on. But yeah, you can definitely download the PDF and send it around or do what you want with it.
Absolutely, and we have courses for your doctors as well. So just the courses I showed earlier, we've had a lot of sports medicine clinicians and that are taking the courses to learn more. So we can obviously help you guys with that as well. Let's move on to our next question. Can you discuss differences you may have seen in recovery with students with some, maybe even undiagnosed learning difficulties or ADHD?
Differences. What I've seen personally is if somebody has controlled a simple, simple ADHD, when that's their only issue, um, you know, sometimes that to me it doesn't affect their recovery. What affects recovery more, and I say doesn't affect recovery, meaning a typical, the standard 10 to 14 day recovery. My average over the last 3 years of time loss is right around 10 to 14 days. And so with some, that's all ranges of some kids with learning disabilities, some kids not. The kids that have with ADHD have another complicating factor, whether it be an anxiety issue, a depression issue, a um, uh, reading problem, have special IEPs or different things in the classroom that they need help with. Those kids that have a combination, typically, I always tell the coaches ahead of time, I expect this person to last a little bit longer, because sometimes when they're reporting their symptoms, you don't know if they're reporting symptoms. Well, you do know. The question is how much of that symptom is concussion, how much of it is anxiety, depression that gets triggered by the concussion, or it's just their normal. And so it's hard to tease that out sometimes. So I just have seen those kids tend to take 14 to 17 to 21 days at a lot of times rather than the normal 10 to 14 days. And so that's what I would say. If you have just ADHD, sometimes I think that's not always going to be a long recovery. But if you get multiple things, multiple issues together, that tends to kind of lengthen the process of recovery. Do we have another one?
Yeah, we've got just a few more. I think we can answer pretty quickly, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. Our next question, could you use weight balance measures to identify lower extremity deficiencies and or manage lower extremity injuries or post-surgery?
Yeah, I think you can. I think you can, if you were looking for, if you did baselines on everybody and you went in and looked at all their balance scores, and you had certain people, your skill guys were on the lower end of the normative range, or a person was on that lower end, I think you could use that and as a trigger to maybe identify some people that need some work in balance, or give them targets post-surgical of, hey, this was your baseline balance before your ACL surgery. Let me go ahead and do another balance test throughout the process of the ACL recovery, and get back to give the kids a target to get back to. So yeah, I think you can use it for that as well.
And just for a quick kind of additional note, that's one area where we're doing a lot of test development. So we actually have a sit to stand or squat test that would be really useful in those type of cases, like the ACL, reconstruction, looking at kind of depth of squat, right to left side, lean from a accelerometry perspective, and then a single leg squat too. So obviously that dynamic coordination, that dynamic stability is going to be a really useful future test that we'll be bringing to the platform here in the next 12 months or so.
Absolutely. And I actually am working on a webinar with case studies just for lower extremity injuries. So look for that probably in the next few months, but it is going to be a full webinar just on lower extremity, and we'll have case studies and show you guys how to manage those with Sway as well. All right, let's get one more question and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Do you get baselines for every athlete prior to each season? And do you have access to previous seasons they have played?
Yes, we do baseline data collection on all of our athletes. It's part of our protocol every season. So that's one of the reasons we went to doing this, is because with Sway, is because it's so fast and efficient to get a baseline. If you've done impact baselines or some other, to me, some of the other testing that I've done, it takes a while to get guys through. And with Sway, as part of their physical every year, we just have them, when we do their physical, have them do a new Sway baseline. And it goes pretty quickly, about five minutes added to their pre-participation physical, and it makes it nice. And yes, I think access to previous seasons, yes. I mean, I have access to any data that we've collected in their time here. So I think that's the question. Or if a kid transfers and is using the Sway at another school, I don't know, Chase, if there's a way to transfer that kid's data to my data set. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we do allow that. That's something that you can request. Our customer support team can help execute that. So absolutely, if there's a existing record, obviously that's more about kind of approval process. So,
right.
Dave, if you have an athlete that leaves Arkansas and goes somewhere else, we'd need your approval to be able to share that data, because obviously it exists within your system, but that's not a problem for us to be able to transfer that.
Okay. But yeah, all the records from your athletes are there, and then when they graduate, you can transfer them into a kind of a non-active team, so to speak, on your system, and so there's all their data still there. That's correct, right, Chase?
Yes. Yeah,
That is
absolutely.
correct. Yeah. And we always give you access to your data, even, if you want a list of every athlete that's been through your system, we are happy to put that together for you. Just reach out to customer success and they're happy to put that together. So I think this concludes our educational portion. Dave, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. Lots of great information.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And Chase, yeah, thank you, Dave. And we'll see you at a future event. I know your schedule's busy, but we'll find another time to do this one more time.
Okay.
Sounds great. Chase, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely, Labiba. Thanks for having me, and thanks to Dave for going through this. This is really helpful, I think, to see how our customers use it in real life. Obviously we're in a little bit of a silo sometimes when we're developing this stuff, so great to be able to see how new features help and how they're really kind of driving utilization in our actual customers' hands.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to finish up with additional training. So I know you guys came to the website to register for this course, but we do have a number of other courses that are helpful. This one here is the interdisciplinary team approach to clinical implementation, and that's with our Duke family. We've got the AT in secondary school setting. That's with Steve Freebus and the Tulsa Public Schools. Obviously, we have this one here, and this will be released as an on-demand. And for those of you that don't know, we also offer continuing education credits. We offer CEUs through the BOC for one course a month. All right, everyone. Thanks again. Have a great day, and we'll see you at a future event. Bye-bye.